Steve, you were getting here at the beginning. When are services products, or more so, how do you productize services? And I'll start off here. You know, to me, if we're talking about that base definition, right? It's a solution to a problem. It shouldn't matter if it is a hard good or a software or services or experience, right? It should be whatever it is. And so services are products. But then the second part of the question comes around, how do you sell it if it's not consistent, right? If services are different. Jason, do you guys have professional services as part of your, if somebody buys your stuff, there's services to implement it, right?
Yeah, so this is interesting because I think repeatability is an interesting piece to the product component, because if I create something, let's say from a code perspective, if I do something very bespoke for a customer and we're just a code shop, at the end of the day, is that solution a product? And so it's a product of my work, and by definition, but is it something that's productized, and is it something I can sell repeatedly? And I think the same thing is with services. And so when we look at services, we do have the custom component, but those aren't the things that are productized. And I think from a high level, you're putting together, and this is similar to what you guys do with training, and Steve, what you do with Under 10. You're looking at, this is my structure of my services, this is my approach, this is what the outcome is going to be, this is what the lead behind, this is what the desire is from the customer, but you may change a bit of those services. So that's the productized component. And then the unproductized component is maybe what is the end result as a little bit of tweaking or customization to meet the needs of that specific entity.
Can you even productize that you do that though? Is the fact that you're willing to customize for their needs, could you productize that as a value prop that solves a problem for them?
I think you can.
Tom, I mean, I'm thinking back to your Fiserv days, but where you are now is probably, you guys have big solutions for big banks and stuff, right?
Yes, we do.
Did you guys productize services?
At Fiserv, we did. There were services around those applications to aid, assist people. And there were definitely services that were productized. At ZM, less so. It's more about the product. So we don't get into it as much right now, but definitely at Fiserv, there was a lot of that.
Jon.
I mean, if we go back to your definition of a product, then I can't see how we would remove services from that definition, right? It's the manner in which you're solving that product, and maybe it's not as scalable as a productized version, to use the way I think it was Jason was talking about it. But it's still a product. Like if I make one-off furniture for somebody, it's custom every single time. It's not very scalable, but I'm still making a product. I'm still selling it. I'm still meeting people's needs and all that, right?
So this is where, Steve, I was leading to. You know where I'm going, right?
I never know where you're going. You know what? You say this all the time. You send me these softballs, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're thinking.
Softball just hits you right in the head.
I spent 3 hours trying to come up with questions that are going to lead to a softball for Steve. And
Indeed.
He was a distance runner, not a baseball player.
Distance runner. Yeah, I'm in it for the long haul. Well, I want to go back to applaud Jason's comment. My big thing on product is repeatable. So I worked with a company up in Canada. They were trying to productize their offering, and I said, "Well, what is your offering?" And they said, "Man hours. We've got 5 people with this expertise, and they'll do anything. You name it, they'll do it." And I'm like, that's just consulting. That's not a that's not a product. It's not standard. So for me, repeatable and standardized is an element of the difference between a product and one-off consulting.
So to use Jon's making furniture concept, if you had a design, a kit or whatever, and you made them custom, but you used the same design and components each time you made them custom, is that a product?
I think if it is done if it is a standard delivery system, then it wants to be, to me, it wants to be a product. It's the standard and repeatable. So for instance, next day blinds, that's where this comes from.
Yep.
They do a lot of what I perceive to be custom work, but what they really have is a big warehouse of parts that they can assemble quickly in apparently one day, um, to to meet my requirements. It's not like they're back in the back room sewing together a blind. It's like, well, we need the red Legos and we need the yellow Legos and we need a backplane Lego, and we're going to put them all together, and Steve's going to think it's custom, but it's there are only so many window sizes to play with.
Yeah. See, I agree with that. I'm of the mind that you can still productize custom consulting and that type of stuff. If you have a standard process for delivery and it's a standard value proposition you're selling against.
Okay, that's
So-
fair.
If you can hang it on something. I think, when I had my innovation company, even though we did in-house only pieces of it, so we did the front end, we wrote requirements, and we did the back end launch. We weren't engineers. We weren't allowed to own screwdrivers or anything like that. So, but we talked about the value chain, and we sold the value chain to customers. And when our clients had and a lot of it was custom work, but when our clients had a question about launching a new product anywhere, any type of new product that was in the B2B world, they knew to call us because we sold the value chain. It was a highly customized service. We had very common processes, but we sold the service. We had rates, we had specific features that we did, and we provided, again, I go back to outcomes. We provided an outcome, and as long as I can provide an outcome to help somebody achieve an outcome that they want, launching a new product, figuring out, designing a new product, coming up with a prototype, that gave us the ability to sell a highly, consultative service as a product. And I will say this, I successfully sold that company in 2014. It gave me something to sell, because when I sold it, they thought they were buying a product.
I think, to me, Rob, that's exactly where my head was around the productization of services. Part of the productization is making it easier to sell and communicate the value proposition. Right.
And a friend of mine bought a consulting company on the belief that they had all sorts of standardized packages. We can do installs, we can do implementations, we can do training, we can do the other thing. And then they got into it and found out that everybody was doing their own thing. In effect, they had no IP. They just had, a number of smart people who could do smart things. And so for me, that is not a product. Smart people doing smart things is brilliant, but I don't know how you scale that. I don't know how you repeat it. I don't know how you pay for it. And I know that, in that case, they were generally just saying, well, we'll send smart people to you for $400 an hour. And then they'd get into big arguments about whether it should be 400 or 250 or 125, because it wasn't, in my view, because it wasn't standardized. It wasn't repeatable.
So let me put a question to you, Steve. Consultant, pay me $200,000 and my people will build it for you. Contracting agency, I will rent you people at $150 an hour to build a product yourself. Are both of them,
Well, I guess either one is a product, because both, at least in the second example, even though you're selling people by the hour, you've got the people, you've got the parts, right?
Yeah.
And you've packaged them in such a way that you can, that you have, what? To me, actually, I find myself going back in my head to my metaphor called Aspire. And that is, what are your corporate capabilities? And as long as you have the systems to throw 10 people at $125 an hour at this problem, then it becomes repeatable. We know how to take their money. We know how to pay the consultants. We know how this leverages our expertise and our authority. So the second one, I definitely feel was a product. The first one was, I'll come in and do this for you for $200,000.
We'll build it. We'll build it for you.
That may be a project rather than a product.
Unless we have a repeatable system for how do we deliver on that, right?
Indeed.
And Steve,
that's the key word for me, is repeatable.
And this is to me the deck story, right?
Oh, is that the softball? See, you remember stories that I forgot that are my stories. But yeah, I used to tell a story about when my wife and I replaced the deck on the back of our house. They showed up and they built a deck, and we went out on the porch and we had drinks and watched the sun go down, and I bought a deck. That was my job to be done, is I want to be drinking outside on the deck. And yet a lot of services companies, drop ship a lot of wood at my house and say, hey, put it together yourself. Or they sell me 10 man hours of people, and they come to my house and they bang on my house for 10 hours and then say, okay, the 10 hours is up. Don't walk near the edges because we didn't do any of the guardrails. The do it yourself and the man hours that didn't complete the job did not satisfy my issue. That was not the job I needed done. It was not the market problem I needed solved.
So, and it goes back to the pizza. I mean, the pizza analogy is the same place. For different personas, for different segments, the product is different, right? Mm-hmm. For your persona, for your segment, you wanted a completed deck. You didn't. My brother-in-law, he's an engineer. He built a 100-foot staircase down a 100-foot hill so he could put a dock in the lake, right? And he didn't hire somebody. He went and bought the wood and actually bought a trailer to carry the wood and built a system to take the wood down the hill for him, right?
But that's a project, not a product.
But
he bought components and parts.
He bought wood. He bought bolts. He bought other things. And so,
but he's not ever going to build another deck like that.
What about yeah. So it was just, this got me thinking about that story.
Gotcha.
Tom, has this gotten any enlightenment, any big position on productization and services?
No, I mean, the conversation overall is interesting, and I have to keep myself from wanting to go down rabbit holes or get into specifics on certain things that really they're not relevant to the conversation at this point.
Wait, Steve and I go down rabbit holes not relevant to the conversation all the time.
Oh, no. I can't remember what it was. There was something you said at the beginning of this conversation. I thought, I'll dive into that. And I thought, no, that's not really the point of this conversation. So I needed to stay away from that. The conversation overall, keeping it higher level and more to the theory is more appropriate. And that's what I'm listening to and getting out of it.
All right. So any last thoughts on services and productization before we go to our rapid fire final question?
I think given the conversation, we either need to redefine what a product is, because as Steve mentioned multiple times, scalable is important. Because if it's a solution for a persona's problem, including all the components necessary to fully solve that problem and the experience, then the services can easily solve that problem. Like the $200,000 project you're talking about solves that company's problem fully with a positive experience, even if it's not necessarily scalable or repeatable. Or
does a methodology make it a product though? Do you, as a consulting company, Accenture, whoever else has a standard methodology? This is how we do a consulting project. We do this, then we do this, then we do this, then we do this, then we do this. That framework, that proven process.
I think that makes it a more successful product, makes it more profitable and easier to run, easier to do,
easier to sell,
and easier to scale.
Yeah,
and easier to scale. But even if it's not scalable, unless we change the definition of product from the beginning, which maybe just be arguing semantics, but then it's not like,
that's what this call is about, John. It's all
well, then let's keep arguing semantics. We need to either change the definition or accept the fact that all that Accenture is doing is making their product better by putting
Yeah.
the framework around it.
Steve,
So.
what's the slide you have in your new one talking about a system, and if it's not repeatable, it's a
Yeah, in fact, I was using it to cheat during this conversation. I made 3 points in a presentation I do on the foundations or the fundamentals of product. If it's delivered only once, it's consulting. If it doesn't deliver benefits, then it's a part or a component. And if the customer isn't defined, then it's an experiment.